All right, well, hello and welcome, everyone. So delighted that everyone is joining us from around the nation this evening. And we still have a few people rolling in, so I'm just going to start with some housekeeping before we get into our program. I'd like to invite everyone to turn on the chat function. We're going to be using the chat function throughout the program, so please go ahead and post a greeting in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from. Also, would just like everyone to know that you have been muted for sound control, but you can type questions and comments in the chat as we move through the program. Also, want to let you know that closed caption is enabled, so you can turn on that function as well. And also to let you know that we are gathered tonight in this collegial environment that is respectful of our varying and diverse perspectives. So we're just really excited to gather everyone around. And also to let you know that this meeting is being recorded. All right, so that's all the housekeeping. Welcome, everyone. And if you aren't muted, go ahead and mute yourself. And we'll be muting you just to help with the sound. And I'd like to just begin by introducing myself. Hello again and welcome to ARTEFFECT, Character and Values. I'm Dr. Tony Guglielmo, Director of ARTEFFECT. I've been in this position leading ARTEFFECT since January of last year, so almost 2 years. And it's just been my pleasure to be in this position, helping ARTEFFECT grow. And one of the things that we have been doing is launching new professional development. So really excited that everyone has found their way here this evening. And I would like to begin by introducing my team as well. We have joining us on the call from Santa Monica, California, which is where we're located, are my two teammates that are here with me. So I'm going to invite them to say a quick greeting as well to the group. And let's begin with Emmy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emmy. As Tony mentioned, I'm here in Santa Monica with the rest of the ARTEFFECT team. I'm originally from Colorado, and I'm so excited to be with you all tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
And hello, everybody. My name is Connor Walton. I'm also a program coordinator here in Santa Monica with ARTEFFECT. And I'm from Texas originally. I know we have a few Texans here tonight. Hello, I guess howdy. And yeah, excited to be here with everybody.
Great. Thank you, Emmy and Connor. And of course, our team member who's also leading us on ARTEFFECT is Mr. Lowell Milken, who is the founder of the Lowell Milken Center for Unsung Heroes and the founder of ARTEFFECT. And it's through Mr. Milken's vision for strengthening communities through education and innovation that has made this program possible. So he is very connected and closely following our efforts to foster the visual arts through the stories of the unsung heroes. So we're delighted that everyone is here as well. So we would actually like to know a little bit more about you and who is joining on this call. We have a very quick poll that Connor is going to pull up right now. It's 3 questions. And just asking if you could just take a quick minute to fill this out. All right, so I see that we've got 3 questions. What grade level are you working with? What's your primary role? And whether this is your first ARTEFFECT event. Just give it another second. Right, it looks like we can take a quick look at the poll results. And let's see, so we have, okay, well, we have mostly 61%, no good with math in there, but 61% of our participants are in grades 9 through 12 in high school, excellent, followed closely by middle school with 32%, 12 of us in the group, and then we also have some educators from the younger grades, and some at 21%, and then other guests and higher ed and other roles. And for the primary work role, well, 71% classroom teachers. We have some nonprofit staff and administrators, teaching artists, and some other roles. Okay, great. Take the time to introduce yourself if you're new to ARTEFFECT. It's almost like 45% are new, so welcome, and 53%, 20 of you are returning. Okay, great. Well, thank you for filling this out quickly, and I want to invite you again to just post a greeting if you're new and let us know where you're joining from. So we are gonna actually begin our program, and I wanted to introduce a little bit about ARTEFFECT and its overall mission for us to take a look at. Oh, I wanted to introduce our ARTEFFECT ambassadors. Thank you, Connor, for bringing this up. So, and actually we have on the call, I didn't quite see, but if you're an ARTEFFECT ambassador, I invite you to raise your hand. So our ambassadors program is in its second year. So whether you are a new or returning ambassador, please go ahead and raise your hand. We'd love to see and welcome you, and Emmy's gonna shout you out there in the chat. So this year we have just announced our second cohort. Very excited that we have 34 ambassadors from middle and high school working across 21 states nationwide. Ambassadors participate in these online programs, and then they also work on a capstone project that culminates with their efforts in June, where they have implemented a project in their classroom or community that brings the stories of the unsung heroes and the visual arts to their particular learner-centered context. So we're just delighted that the ambassadors are here, and we're officially announcing the cohort this week. So Emmy is posting some information about the profiles and the press release in the chat. Right, so welcome ambassadors, Carrie, Molly, Susan, Sarah, Ashley, Chrissy, yay, from last year, Liz, Rosie, excellent. So it's nice to see everyone. Elisa, right, Michelle, Karina, Jen, shout out everyone, Aja, Mary, Arcana, Susanna, so nice to see everyone. All right, well, we're gonna quickly begin with a quick overview of ARTEFFECT. And for those of you who are new, ARTEFFECT is a growing art education initiative. We invite educators and their students to explore the inspiring stories of unsung heroes from the Lowell Milken Center for Unsung Heroes and their invaluable lessons as role models through the visual arts. So ARTEFFECT offers right now professional development, of which you are taking part in this evening. As Ambassador Fellowship is another part of our professional development. We also offer an annual student art competition that's been running since 2016, and I will tell you a little bit more about that at the end of the program. And we also offer online exhibitions, and we have some exhibitions in development. Hopefully a new website coming very soon in 2025. So in the next slide, I wanted to just explain a little bit more about the unsung heroes. I know you've been hearing that, but I wanted to take a moment to define how we use that term. So unsung heroes are individuals that are not commonly known. They have demonstrated altruistic actions such as courage, compassion, sacrifice, and conviction. They have taken action that has been in service to others in society, and that has a profound and positive impact on the course of history. So at the center, we have a growing list of unsung heroes, and this is the content that we're mostly working with, these diverse and inspiring stories that span from ancient times to the modern times. And I wanted to just also tell you a little bit about our overarching goals very quickly as a summary. So for ARTEFFECT, we are here with that intention to strengthen student learning through the visual arts, to support teacher engagement, to work with this content, and to also inspire others through this work. So the reason I bring this up is because I wanted to remind everyone that, we focus on the unsung heroes, but we as educators, like the unsung heroes, make a positive and profound impact in the lives of our students. And really all of this work is guided by our founder's vision that one individual has the power to make a positive and profound difference in the lives of others. So I know that we want to empower our students to do that and to really applaud our efforts as educators and your efforts as educators in the classroom doing this on a daily basis. So, and to inspire others through this story, whether they be people that are in the community and beginning to recognize the everyday heroes in our community. So, all right, well, I am going to turn the program over to our guest speaker, Dr. Veronica Alvarez, and it's really my pleasure this evening to introduce Dr. Alvarez. She has prepared this session for us on character and values. She also has prepared a very robust lesson plan, which is being posted in the chat that I invite you to download, and you can walk through that lesson plan, take some notes on that lesson plan if you'd like. We're going to be going through the work of that. Veronica is an educator, art historian, arts administrator. She's currently executive director of Create California. She has expertise in connecting language and ELA with the visual arts. She's an arts advocate, and I'm going to have Veronica introduce herself, but before I pass the baton, just want to say that Veronica is a dear friend. We've known each other through the art circles. We fortunately connected and have been able to be collegially involved and stay connected throughout the years. And she's been a dear friend of ARTEFFECT since 2015. So really just thrilled to have an exceptional educator and administrator guide us in the lesson tonight. So Veronica.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to jump on Zoom, even though many of us may be tired of Zoom. But one thing that I really appreciate about Zoom is that it can connect so many of us. I saw people coming from all over the country and Guam, and I see some familiar faces. Jaime, hi Jaime and Kim. And so that's really awesome that we're able to connect on this level. So I have, I think, about an hour with you. So if you want to move over to the agenda, so I could talk to you about what we're going to do today. We're going to do what are character and values. I think right now is character matters. Character is very important. And we're going to be doing things interactively. So please get pens, pencils ready, a warm cup of tea or coffee. And as we walk through the program, we're going to talk about historical empathy, which I think is really important. We're going to talk about empathy and how art could help build that, how do portraits tell stories. We're going to do an art activity, extensions, and then we're going to talk about extensions. And then I have a formal Q&A at the end if there's time. However, please feel free to unmute yourself and jump in if you have a question, or you could ask a question in the chat, and Emmy probably will be able to answer that better than I, but I will try to keep abreast of the chat as well. Is everyone ready? Is everyone excited? I know it's late for some of you, but I'm super excited to share this space with you today at such an important time. So the next slide. What we're going to talk about is defining what values. So this is a poll as well. It's called, and we're going to create a word cloud. And it's called polleverywhere.com. And you could use this with your students. It's free. So I'm trying to make things so that if you want, you could immediately use this lesson with your students. So what values and character traits are important for a person to have? So if you want, you could click on the link on the left, and that'll take you to the webpage, or the QR code of the QR code. You could put your phone and just take a snapshot, and it'll ask you just to sign up briefly, and then you could just create a word cloud. We're going to create a word cloud with all of your input. So what values and character traits are important for a person to have? So honesty, integrity, empathy. I love, we already talked about empathy, compassion, perseverance. So what is coming up? See, I love this. This is all interactive. So honesty is really jumping out. Actually, I want to write that down. Honesty, empathy, integrity, kindness, compassion. Okay, so those are trustworthy, respect, volunteerism. That's awesome. Like volunteering your time, giving up, patience, especially if you're a parent or a teacher, right? Patience is key. Compassion, grit. Okay, honor. Awesome. Thank you so much for participating. So we're gonna move to the next slide and do the very same thing, but the question is gonna be slightly different. What values or character traits are important for a hero to have? And again, if you need on the left, you could go to the web page or you could do the QR code on the right. Is there a difference? Are you going to answer differently? Is it the same? So as things are coming up. Selflessness, courage. Okay, I don't know if we saw courage as much last time. Again, compassion, selflessness. Okay. Bravery. As Tony mentioned, I love doing art and language and all of this. And one of the things I really love about, you could do so many ELA lessons in terms of like having things like what are synonyms, courage, bravery, against honesty, willingness to sacrifice. So that's very similar to selflessness. Awesome. Okay. Okay, so we had selflessness and courage on one as like really, and actually empathy, I think, went across both. So that's very interesting. Okay, wait there. Thank you so much for participating. And again, these are just, as we're walking through, if there's something that you could use with your students in any different way, we're going to do that. So as we move along to the next slide, as Tony mentioned, and those of you that are ambassadors, you're going to do a project. And one of the things that your students are going to do, and that's what I've been doing, is participating in ARTEFFECT is in judging winners. And our last winner of last year was Rachel Hahn, Visions of Light. And here she's depicting Karl Ernst von Baer, a Russian. He's considered the founder of embryology. So what character traits or values do you think Rachel depicted that may be heroic in this work of art? And you could just chime in on the chat, or if you want to mute yourself quickly and just say what you think the character values are being depicted. Perseverance. Okay, yes, Jennifer, embryology, being a scientist, care for women, vision, focus, dedication. Okay, grit. We saw that coming across, grit, curiosity. Yeah, to be a successful scientist, you do have to have perseverance, determination. Oh, that's a really good point about service to others. Usually scientists, when they create or discover something, it does benefit others. Deeper thinking. Oh, this is awesome. When I was looking at this, I was like wondering like, oh, what would people respond to? Precision. Great. Okay, and the next slide. As you could see from ARTEFFECT, your students will be, inherent kindness. I like that, Jaime. The unsung heroes, they could come from, depending on the subject matter you teach, and I know some of you teach history, some of you teach science. There's over 130 unsung heroes that you can choose to have your students study and really get into it, because what this project will allow students to do is research a subject, really understand the impact that they've made on either science or math or whatever, and people whose stories we haven't really heard from. And I really love that there is an emphasis on women, and usually a lot of women are unsung heroes because their stories were hardly ever told. So I think that that's important to consider as your students, and then having your students choose folks that they think are important for people to know about. So next slide. I think. We'll just go over this one very briefly because this is another award winner, which I really love, and I wanted to show him because we're going to talk about a work of art of Louis Hine. And here the story is by Reilly Q. Louis Hine was a photographer, and he had a real impact on child labor laws in this country. So if we want to move on. As we see here, these are on LMC's Unsung Hero, the heroic traits that we saw in the word cloud, right? We saw compassion, we saw conscious, courage, generosity, humility, perseverance, especially with Yvonne Bayer. We saw perseverance coming a lot, coming forward. And what I really want to stress with this slide is like you could have these heroic traits, but unless you create an action, it's not very helpful, right? So the heroic traits should lead to heroic action, whether it's discovering something new to help humankind, or like Louis Hine, through his portraits, he was able to implement an action and actually change child labor laws in this country. Okay. The next slide. And what I want to emphasize, so what is empathy? And we saw that a lot in the word crowd. To have character and values, we need heroic empathy. And empathy is where the research has shown that we are born with innate empathy. You know, if babies see somebody crying, they generally cry. If they see a smile, they tend to smile back. So we are born with inherent empathy. However, at the same time, there's research shows that we are selective as we grow older, especially we're selective of who we empathize or feel empathy towards. We often feel very strong empathy for people that we relate to, the us, and we're less empathetic to folks that we consider them. So there's a gap in what how we deal with our empathy. And I want to address that because I think it's very important during this time period about this gap. And the analogy that is used, something like, you know, if you win a football game, well, I'm here in LA. So like, I'm really empathetic and excited when the Lakers win. And at the same time, if the Lakers win, that means somebody's losing. Are we able to feel empathy for the losing team? I should have said the Dodgers, since the Dodgers won the World Series. So the Dodgers, like, so excited, Dodger fan, they won the Dodgers, but the Yankee fans, you know, am I able to feel empathy for them? That's something to really be conscious and thinking about. And so I want to address things like that. But what is empathy? And I'll just read it aloud. Empathy is the stimulated emotional state that relies on the ability to perceive, understand, and care about the experiences or perspectives of another person or animal. And I added the animal into it because a friend of mine is doing some work at the LA Zoo. And what he's finding is that when people take care of or deal with animals, they build empathy among themselves. So I wanted to add that caveat. But empathy, like I said, if being able to perceive the feelings of others. And there's a really cool museum. It's called the Empathy Museum, and it's basically a shoebox. And what happens is you are able to go into this museum and you take the shoes. And this is what I think a lot of people relate to empathy. You take the shoes of someone and you literally walk a mile in their shoes as you're listening to their stories. So the idea of listening to other stories and being able to care about their experiences helps build empathy. Okay, so if we move to the next slide. What is really interesting, and we're going to delve in a little bit more, is that this idea of historical empathy. And this is where art really comes in, because historical empathy is the ability to understand and appreciate what life was like for people who lived in a different time and place. So we have found, and research has shown, that looking at works of art can help build that. So if we go to the next slide, the Crystal Bridges. So Crystal Bridges did a report. Crystal Bridges is a museum that's in Arkansas. It's in Bentonville, Arkansas. And it was founded by the Walmart family, Alice Walton, sorry. So the Walton family owns Walmart. So they have a lot of money. And so they were able to do what a lot of museums can't do, which is conduct a huge study on going and doing field trips at the museum. And this study is really important because it's almost like a gold standard in research, in that they had a control group, because there hadn't been a museum for like 50 miles. There are no museums within 15 miles of Crystal Bridges. So they had this perfect control group. None of the kids had gone to the museum. So they were able to study the kids that went to the museum and those that didn't. And it was a really big study with the University of Arkansas. They studied over 10,000 students, almost 11,000, 489 teachers, and 123 schools. And what they found when they went back to the students after their field trip, they went to study the students. And what they found on the next slide is that the main key findings is that students actually retained a lot of information, and they really built their they built students' critical thinking, historical empathy, tolerance, and interest in art museums. Those were the 4 areas that the research really found. And what they asked the students, and they did a scale of agreement to disagreement. I can imagine what life was like for people 100 years ago. And when looking at a painting that shows people, I try to imagine what those people are thinking. So that is one of the main key findings, was that students could look at people from the past and do historical thinking based on that. And then the other thing that I have on there is about tolerance. I think people can have different opinions about the same thing. So again, they asked questions to gauge students' tolerance, and that was another key finding. If we go to the next slide. So for example, in terms of, like I said, retaining factual information and then being able to apply it to historical empathy was a key finding. So for example, when they went back, 88% of students who saw this painting at the camp Spinning Yarns and Whittling, they knew that the painting depicts abolitionists making maple syrup to undermine the sugar industry, which relied on the labor of enslaved people. So students were able to identify and adapt with abolitionists and the cause that they were trying to support to abolish slavery in this country. Likewise, similarly, 82% of students who saw Norman Rockwell's Rosie the Riveter, they could recall that the painting emphasizes the importance of women entering the workforce in World War II. So during their tour, they looked at this painting, students were asked about their observations, and then they were told some factual information of how this was almost the first time in American history where women were going into the workforce in big numbers and having to support their families while men were off fighting. So are there any questions or comments on this, on the building of historical empathy using works of art? Again, I find it so fascinating because sometimes what I find so interesting about this when we think about it is that students only had about an hour tour. So an hour tour isn't a lot of contact time between the museum and the students. And then, as I mentioned, they went back anywhere from 3 to 8 weeks after their visit, and students were still, the majority of the students were still very much able to retain so much factual information about what they learned at the museum, and at the same time apply some empathy to the people being depicted. Any other thoughts or comments before we engage in an activity? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about this using a work of art. So how do portraits tell stories? And if you want to unmute or put in the chat, we're going to ask you some questions about as we look closely at this work of art. What can you tell about the female figure in the artwork? Again, you could post in the chat or unmute yourself. She's a child. Okay, Sherilyn. No shoes, probably she's a worker and very young. Okay, what somebody said, she's dwarfed by the huge machine. She appears young and a cotton mill. Okay, what did you see that made you think that she's appearing to be working or doesn't have a lot of resources as it comes from the spools of yarns behind her? That's how you could tell what she does. She looks tired. Galen, what do you see that makes you think she looks tired? Thin, probably not eating well. Her eyes, she looks very solemn. She looks beaten. She looks skinny, wise beyond her years. The child is in a garment, but she looks tired, helpless, sad. Does anyone want to elaborate on that, on what they see that makes them think that she looks tired and sad? Oh, Susanna, in some ways, though, she looks empowered. Like, if you want to go to the next, and somebody, Catherine Pascal, if you want to go to the next slide, because Catherine just asked the very question I wanted to ask. What does her body language or pose and expression communicate about her? As some of you have already indicated, her body language, she looks tired. She looks confident. Alyssa, do you want to elaborate on why you think she looks confident? She's at ease at her work. She's in a place that she cannot control. Okay.
I think that her leaning
Yes.
on that machine and standing up very tall,
Uh-huh.
to me, it appears that she knows what she's doing and she's confident in the work that she does.
Okay.
Can I add something?
Please do.
So my parents, they both grew up during the Depression. And kids worked, but they didn't think of it the way we do now.
Okay.
It was the fact of life. And I think empowerment might be there, but it really looks like this is what I do, because that is what kids would have been doing. I mean, if you look at kids that go into mine or did go into mines here in the US, they didn't feel put upon. Like, their whole sensibility was different than ours is. So I think that's why that photographer had to make a point of it in a way, because it was not viewed the same.
Okay, that's an important thing. And when we look at the standards, we'll address that about having to put folks in the historical context and thinking about the environment that they were living in, and really having students think about that and how that may make them even more heroic. She has a purpose or a tag. She's very experienced. Okay. If we go to the next one,
There's something or
yes, please.
oh, no,
Whoever.
to get back on that point. Oh, it's Jaime. To get back
Hi,
on
Jaime.
that point.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. History is so important. That's why I love the Unsung Heroes, because they put history in context. And so we look at this picture of this girl, and everything you all said is brilliant, straight up to par. The only problem is this young girl had no power over her destiny. She was born in the 1800s, where child labor was that normal thing. So yeah, so I love the Unsung Heroes, and about empathy. I think it's so important to put in historical context, which is what the previous person said.
Yeah.
Okay. My 2 cents worth. Okay.
No, that's great. I mean, and then we already addressed some of this, what values and characters traits invite us this work to think about. As somebody said, like, she's confident, the perseverance, but also she wants us to know her. Okay, so this idea of being seen, when, as Jaime just said, she might not have, and actually she didn't. She was an orphan. Her both of her parents had died, so she didn't have a lot of control over her life. And actually, when Louis Hine, who I mentioned earlier, was a photographer that documented child labor, he asked her age, and she actually said she was 10. But then other people in the cotton mill, as somebody said, and some of you had relatives that worked in the cotton mill, she was actually only 10. And he found out that she had been working there since she was 8. So by the time he's seen her, she's already had 2 years. the fact that the quality of life for children has changed in the US over the last 100 years. Yeah, that's something very important to think about and to remind your students about. And then finally, again, you all already have addressed so much of this. What else is included in this work of art, describing the setting and the photographs? Just for a lack of time, as we're talking, you already mentioned the fact that she's in a cotton mill, and some of you had already mentioned the fact that she's not wearing shoes. Children in that time were specifically hired to work in the cotton mills, because if you could see, Connor, if you want to put the cursor over the spools of thread and so forth, like children with their tiny little hands were able to move those bobbins as they were going really fast. So it was their little hands that would be able to do that. And then further, she's not wearing shoes because she couldn't. Sometimes they had to climb the machines because they were so small. And if shoes had laces, they could get caught in the bobbins. And of course, at that time, the cotton mill owners weren't very concerned about that. They weren't concerned about kids getting hurt, because not having shoes, they could damage their toes. And sometimes that would often happen. They were more concerned about damaging the machinery. So shoes weren't allowed, so that children at that time weren't able to work those machines quickly and efficiently, because that's what the cotton mill owner wanted, and not really thinking about the safety of the employees that were there. So, so this is, like I mentioned, her name was Addie Card, and she was 12 years old. And what is so fascinating to me, as we were talking about this, so many of you said she was thin and so forth. And to quote Louis Hine, he, in the back of the photographs, because he would go and try to document this for the National Child Labor Association, was a nonprofit that was trying to show child labor. He calls her the anemic little spinner. And so many of you talked about that she was thin and she looked undernourished and so forth. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an activity. And then, we're going to do a blind contour drawing. And as I mentioned, if you want to pull out a pen and paper, I want you to really get, somebody in the chat put that she wanted to be seen. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to see her for her. So if you want to pull out a paper and a pen or a pencil, whatever you have, I want you to choose a point on her arm, on her smock, whatever you want. Or if you want to just slowly focus on her, I want you to just slowly, as if a ladybug was walking. So in a slow, continuous line, I want you to follow the contours of her. So if you want to start at her ear and you go up, and then you might want to go across her forehead, go down to her eyes. So I'm just going to give you about 2 minutes to do a blind contour drawing. And we're going to have a bit of music, I think, as we're music fades out. Thank you, Connor. I think you all are probably a little bit more savvy than I, but if anybody, last time people were able to take a picture and post it on the chat. If y'all are able to do that, that would be amazing. Or if you want to put it to the camera, and if anybody wants to share their sketch. And what I like about this activity, because I should have prefaced, I am not an artist. This is obviously not meant to look realistic at all, because you're not allowed to look down at the paper. So of course it isn't going to look realistic, but if anybody wants to be brave enough to show their work of art to the, oh, Rosie, I see that. Mikal, Austin, Mike, Arkiana. Oh, I love, oh, Emmy, I like how you had you. Is anybody able to do a cool thing and put it in the chat? Oh, Mindy, thank you for sharing, and Molly. Awesome, thank you. How was that experience like for you? Did you see new details? How was it like to spend some time with Addie Card? Oh, Susanna, you're able to do that so fancy. How do you do that? That's so cool. Oh, I love how you have the posture. You have that arm back and you're able to really follow the posture and her body language. That's amazing. Anybody want to share what that experience like was for you, looking at this work of art and slowly? Okay, you found yourself. Sorry, oh, Susan, you're able to do the cool thing too. You found yourself focusing on her eyes and not wanting to leave. Oh, that's amazing, Catherine. A mindful moment, a blind contour. Oh, Arancha. Oh, that's so neat. I hope I said your name correctly. Okay, thank you so much for that. You definitely had a great mindful moment. Great. Sorry, I lost my. Oh, Mindy. Again, I really like how you were able to get the posture. It was interesting and peaceful until the last 10 seconds, and then the music picked up. Sorry, Ashi. Hopefully you're able to do that. Again, you could use this lesson with your students. Oh, they made me question if the music choice would impact the outcome. How so, Ashley, if you want to elaborate on that? That's very interesting to think about, whether the music and what type of music you're playing would impact students' reaction. Thank you, Jessica, for sharing. Okay, so in the next slide, as talked about. So neuroscientist Terry Wu states, and he's the scientist that I really look at, I guess he's a neuroscientist, and he studies empathy. He says, art can be a powerful way for us to gain a better understanding of human emotions and stories. It gives us a unique lens to look at an artist's inner worlds. It trains our brains to slow down and think more rationally instead of emotionally. It restores our capacity to connect with others. Art plays a unique role in reestablishing humanity in this tech-dominated world. Using your icon at the bottom at your react button, use the thumbs up or down icon. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? Oh, thank you, Lauren, for sharing your work. I always find it so awesome that people know how to do this. I try to do it myself. So do you agree or disagree? Natalie, and if anybody wants to elaborate, why or why not? Why do you agree? So most of you are agreeing. Did doing this activity make you slow down and really empathize with Addie's story? So I think her name was Adelaide and her nickname was Addie. So as I mentioned, Addie was an orphan and she went to work very early in the cotton mill. And then unfortunately for her life, she always really struggled financially. She lived until her 90s, but she was always struggling financially throughout her life.
Oh, may I say something?
Please do.
Oh, okay, okay. So, neuroscientist Terry Wu states, ready? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Art can be a powerful way for us to gain a better understanding of human emotions and stories. It gives us a unique lens to look at artists' inner worlds. It trains our brains to slow down and think more rationally instead of emotionally. It restores our capacity to connect with others. Art plays a unique role in reestablishing humanity in this technology-dominated world. Okay.
Yeah.
So am I supposed to say up if I like it or not?
Yeah. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
Duh! It's completely accurate.
Okay. So
That
you
we
give
actually
2
have
thumbs
to,
up.
no, that we actually have to question this. That's exactly what art does. I'm sorry, yeah. No, when you ask that question, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah,
Yeah. And then
absolutely.
and then, as I mentioned, I really wanted to get people from the real world. So last time we did a painting, but I really wanted to get people that actually lived and inhabited these spaces. And I find it so fascinating. Some of you had relatives that lived this experience. So this is a very lived experience.
Okay,
Oh,
question.
Susanna,
I'm sorry.
regarding how the music. Go ahead, Jaime. Okay, way of seeing. Thank you for that suggestion, Susanna,
Can
about
I,
the
can I
choice
make
of
a
music.
comment? I don't know where my little like thing is, so.
Oh, it's okay, Cheryl. Yes, please do.
So I'm reading this sentence, and I do know that, neuroscience has proven that art and drawing actually activates your brain more than anything else. But I think it's interesting that he's saying it trains our brains to slow down and think more rationally instead of emotionally, because most art emotes, and the
Hmm.
visceral reaction to it is what draws people to it, not the rational critical thinking piece. That comes when you start analyzing, but you're drawn to the emotion of a piece of art most of the time. And so I
Oh,
think I would say emotion first and then rational thinking when you get deeper in. But I think we've all connected with art emotionally first. I don't know, maybe just me.
no, that's a really good point, Cheryl. Like, I think based on the comments you all shared, you had a visceral reaction because so many of you talked about how thin she was and what she was wearing, and there was this emotional reaction. So maybe we I wonder if we did it backwards. If I had you just look closely at her and do the slow down, and would it be rational? And then we do the analysis, and then yeah. Oh, that's fascinating to think about.
Well,
Thank you
I
for
think
that.
Oh,
I think your contour though brings in the analysis piece, because now you've
Uh-huh.
got to, now you've really got to analyze the details of the piece and really get in there. So I think you're actually, you did it that way. You did it from
Okay.
the emotion backwards to the critical
The,
thinking piece, which
the
I think
rational.
is more normal, actually. I don't I appreciate he's a neurologist, but I think art really does speak first and then it teaches. I
Okay.
may I
I
say
love
something?
this discussion. The
May I say
catharsis
something?
of creating allows you to think more clearly, Rosie said. Okay, sorry, who was talking? Go
Oh,
ahead.
me. Oh, may I say something? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
no, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Rosie. Because yes, when we have an emotion, you're like, that is, we have the emotion. And then we think, why did we have that emotion? And I
Hmm.
think that it actually does work that way. First, you see something that inspires you or upsets you, or it's, and then we're like, well, why did that upset me? There's this poor little girl working in a factory. What the heck? That
Yeah.
was the visual, that was the emotion. And then we start thinking, okay, that way, yeah. Yeah, anyway, Rosie, so yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And Veronica, I think you did it perfectly well. First
Oh,
the
good.
emotion,
Thank you.
then the intellect. But we need both, which
We
is why
do
I
need
love that
both.
quote so much. Which is
And
why I
I
love
love,
that quote that you quoted so much.
and then I really love folks talking in the chat about, and the thing about the technology dominated world, because I think that is what Dr. Wu also really deals with, is that we can be less empathetic when we're behind a keyboard, as we all know in this day and time, people cannot be not nice when they don't know the person and otherize them, when they don't know their stories, and when they're behind this technology dominated world. So I love how some of you in the chat are talking about having your students create art, having that tactile experience with clay or whatever, and that idea of creation allows them to build on that. Thank you for that. So the next slide, it is a feeling that bubbles up and allows you to look deeper in curiosity, bringing connection. That's really important, Catherine, this idea of connection and mindfulness. I added this because, as I mentioned, so Louis Hine is the one that took that photograph of Adi Card. And as I mentioned, he worked with the National Child Labor Committee. It was a nonprofit that hired photographers so that they could go around the country and document. So Louis Hine would go and pretend to be a Bible salesman or some other figure so he could have access to these factories, and then kind of interview the kids and ask them their age and how long they were working. And he was originally, and I like to use him because he was a teacher, he says photographs keep the present and the future in touch with the past. Photography can light up darkness and expose ignorance. So, obviously, as I mentioned before, this idea he was a hero because it was dangerous. Like word got around, and factory owners were really upset with his work. So he was brave in going into those spaces. But also he took heroic action. He actually actually traveled tirelessly for several years in order to document everything that was happening in the country. He went to the South and the Northeast and so forth. And his actions led to action because it was through his photographs that, it took a while, to be honest, but the child labor laws were finally changed. And it became more important for kids to get an education versus going to work in factories at 8 years old, like Adi did.
Can I make another comment? Sorry, but
Sure. Do not
photography
apologize, Cheryl.
would have not been like using your iPhone at that time. Like he would have been lugging around
Yes.
a amazing amount of weight and other things to get these photos. Like it would have been a heroic measure, well beyond what a photographer would have to do now. And I think that pointing that out to students, that just the labor of doing what some of these folks did was no small feat in itself. And he was one of
Yes.
the guys.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I kind of said that, or I tried to say that, but Cheryl, you just really highlighted it, that putting people in their historical context is really important, because it isn't just around like going into getting an iPhone. What we would associate, so having students think about what the historic past would have actually entailed, and having them lug around that stuff. And traveling was a lot harder. So that makes him even more heroic in our eyes, probably. Okay,
May I
thank
say
you.
something? Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, before
Yeah.
we will.
And this picture is perfectly what Artifact is trying to do.
Yeah.
Not to kiss your asses, but this is exactly what it's trying to do. Because the text says he was originally a sociology teacher. And he could have been to school, teaching whatever. But what did he do? He went out and he actually took pictures. And instead of being like, there's these horrible child labor laws, we have to do this. I'm a sociology teacher, we have to fix it. He actually took photographs. And he actually showed through his artwork what the reality was. Which,
Yeah.
kind of like what Artifact is doing. You're trying to train these kids to think empathetically, to do whatever. And then sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Yes, definitely. But now we are going to do words. So
Okay.
on that note, so that's kind of the lesson, and we're going to talk about a little extensions. And thank you, Alyssa, for that recommendation on the picture book. Oh, hi, Kim. Oh, I love Kim. I think that the analytical and emotional response go hand in hand. When your eye first perceives an image, the brain first has to unpack what is depicted. That can happen fast, even imperceptibly. Once you recognize what you see, then the emotional response comes, which leads you to analyze more, which leads to more emotions. Oh, thank you for that, Kim. So it's like cyclical. I love this idea of this cyclical thing of analyzing our emotions and then going back, or having emotions, analyzing, and then going back. So what we're going to do next is, as we talked about, like putting ourselves in people's shoes. So we're going to do a writing activity that I think hopefully will help us focus on this. So we're going to look at Migrant Mother, the one that we looked at before. This is a photograph by Dorothea Lange. And in the next, she was a woman that Dorothea Lange was hired to depict folks that were suffering during the Depression. And she saw this woman on the side of a road, and she went back and took 7 images of her, actually. So we're going to do, as I mentioned, like writing in response. We drew in response to a work of art, and now we're going to write in response to a work of art. So if you want to, we're going to do a collaborative poem. You could either, if you want to do it on the back of your sketching, or if you want to just write, choose one of these prompts and respond to it. And we're going to do a collaborative poem. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to have you all do all this. So pick 1 or 2 of these prompts that you want to respond to, and putting yourself in. Her name was Florence Owens Thompson. And as Emmy mentioned, we did put a printable worksheet of this activity, should you want to do this with your students. So let's, in the chat, let's do a collaborative poem about Florence Owens. She was actually Cherokee, and she was born in Oklahoma, and she came to California. So this was taken in Nipomo, California, and her family were pea pickers, and they had gone to this area. However, the peas had frozen, and so there was no jobs. And she was sitting on the side of the road waiting for her husband and her kids when Dorothea Lange came upon her family. So choosing one of the prompts, let's write an I am poem. And you could just put that in the chat. I am a mother. I hear better times are ahead. I dream of a better life for my family. I'll try to get this together. I am still. I want the world for my children. I dream of a future for my family. I dream of home for my children. I dream of full bellies for my family. I'm a survivor. I'm an American. I'm human. I feel it all. I see and imagine futures. I feel worried. I am trying. I'm here. I say I will survive. I hear the tears. I wonder what the future will bring. I wonder what comes next. I am content. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much for everyone. As I mentioned, this activity, I try to do these. I myself am an English learner. English is not my first language. And I remember if somebody would have said, write a poem about a work of art, I think my heart would have dropped to my belly, because poetry is such a skill. So I really like to use like sentence starters or things like that when writing a poem. So when you're giving students, especially English learners, the ability to use a prompt and having that structure is really helpful. I am so distressed and worried. I want a better future for my children. I'm an artist. So if you could imagine having students really look, again, it's that idea of looking closely, trying to tell this woman's story and empathize with her situation, looking back at history. Is like, I think, hopefully a very powerful thing to share with students. Any other questions or comments on this activity? I love our collaborative poem. We should give ourselves an applause for that collaborative poem.
Yeah.
So the next, as I mentioned, are just extensions about, oh, go
Also,
ahead.
sorry. Okay, to back that, yeah, I like it. Can you go back to the slide? I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I love it because it's very simple. Like you said, like you English was not your first language.
Right,
So I like that it starts with I, and then I am, I see, I hear. So it doesn't feel overwhelming. Do you know what I mean?
right.
It's a
Yeah,
noun followed by a verb. And you have so many options that they can choose which ones to choose with. Yeah. So
yeah.
so I like it because like it's grammatically correct in that a noun followed by a verb, and then you have a lot of freedom to choose which one you want to. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
actually like it.
Oh, good. I'm glad. And it's deliberately done that. And that's usually how I frame it. I usually tell students that they could use whatever they want, whatever they feel more comfortable. And as Jaime said, it's a prompt and, I am an artist. That's not fine. Some of you like elaborated on that. And so that was great too. I'm distressed and worried. And as I mentioned, I'm always fascinated with things like that. And the adjectives and or descriptive vocabulary that comes from looking at works of art, because distress and worried, they're kind of synonyms. But distress is like more of a negative thing than worried. So then like really analyzing when students come up with the different descriptive words and then asking them to elaborate on why they chose those words are really great.
Oh, and actually, now that you mentioned it, I was looking over again. Okay, so the I, yeah, but I also love am, see, hear, feel, pretend, wonder, want, say, hope, dream. Those are 10 verbs. And you might know some of them, you might not know the other ones, but there's enough choice that you can also, yeah. No, it's brilliant. I'm sorry. I love
Okay, I'm glad. I'm glad that you do.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, so there's so many extensions. So like I said, this is probably an ELA connection. Another extension could be a compare and contrast for those of you that teach social studies. Jaime mentioned like a picture is worth 1,000 words, but then what about looking at words? And so here you could compare the image of Addie Card, the 10-year-old girl, and then so Addie was actually in Vermont, but Lowell Mills were another cotton mills in Massachusetts, right? And you could look at this advertisement, compare and contrast the life that she lived working in a cotton mill and an advertisement for women asked to work in a cotton mill. How many of us would sign up for this? It says, the standard time. So you start work at 6:30 a.m., you leave work at 6:30 p.m., except for Saturday evenings. You eat breakfast at 6, dinner at 12, and then you start work right after dinner at 12:45 p.m. The first bell rings at 4:30 a.m., the second at 5:30, the third at 6:20. So how many of you would have rushed to sign up for this? Or how many, as we talked about with Addie, she had no choice in really signing up to do this. So I think it's really great to look at, and then social sciences, you're really looking at primary sources. And this idea, both of these are primary sources. One is a work of art and one is an advertisement from that time period. But really get, like I said, I used to teach history. So this idea of having students really analyze and think about the primary sources is really important. And bringing those, again, putting them in their historical context. Next slide. Another extension, and I found any excuse to work this. So I used to work at the Getty with Jaime and a few folks there, Kim. I love this work of art by Jared Dow. It's called Astronomer by Candlelight. And Jared Dow was, he worked with Rembrandt, but what is heroic about this? An astronomer. I love to have students think about that. What heroic traits are being depicted? Here he is by candlelight. So this idea of perseverance, working late into the night. And actually this idea of astronomy as being heroic is really fascinating because there was a time exploring the unknown. Thank you, Catherine. This idea of like the scientist pushing forward knowledge. And sometimes, the heliocentric world, as we know, or the idea that actually the earth revolved the sun was very progressive and astonishing, and people were imprisoned for even promoting something like that. So being the first to discover, Jennifer, as you mentioned. So I wanted to do some history connections, science connections, and this idea of astronomy and science, I thought was really fascinating. And then you could also do a different or the very similar activity that we did with Addie about the person, what does their body language and expression communicate and so forth. And what is the setting, this idea of a globe and pushing science and so forth. You could see the hourglass on the left-hand side. So this idea of time and timekeeping is just really fascinating to me. Okay, if we go on. So your turn. So I'm just going to go quickly through these slides because I'm running out of time, but I love these conversations. This is so fascinating, why I love why I love looking at works of art with people. But there's several, so this is the idea of how you could set up students for success when they're creating their projects. So if we go to the next slide, this idea of journal exercising, students are going to have to write an artist statement when they do their project. So the idea of what impact do they make the course of history? What values or character traits does an unsung hero have? Are they similar to the ones that the class came up with when we did the word cloud? How did the individual acts influence the time and place that she lived? Again, this really important, the idea of putting people in their historical context. And then what research materials you use. I think right now it is so key to be literate about the historical media literacy and being very critical about the resources and where you're getting the sources. What is the motivation for telling the story? Who's telling the story? Are they a legitimate source? And if we go on to the next slide, this sketching exercises, what is the strongest? So just having students think about these as they're preparing their artwork, because how are you going to communicate about your unsung hero? What is the best media to use? Is it 2D? Is it 3D? Consider the hero's appearance and words and identifying attributes. And how are you going to interpret their story, both through the media that you're using and the choices that you're making, the composition. So this idea of artistic choice is very important, and having students articulate that is very important. Because, and what I also want to stress with this slide is that it is a process. Usually, I think when we ask students to write, we tell them there's going to be drafts. So have that in mind when they're creating a work of art. There's going to be drafts. And this idea of sketching and having them build and analyze and having them experiment about what their ultimate project will look like. Okay, and then we're just going to fly through this next few slides. These are just, as I mentioned, the idea of standards. These are ELA standards, the anchor standards we're using. If we go to the next slide, we'll see the social studies standards. And some of the things, if you look, and these are the choice of artworks that we use today are related to the standards that you see here. So the idea of scientific and technological changes brought about massive social change. When Eli Whitney invented his cotton mill, this allowed for the manufacture of cotton mills, like where Addie Card worked. Discuss the human toll of the depression, as we did with Migrant Mother. So really keep in mind what works of art you're going to use, what standards you want to address, and then you'll find a work of art that will address those standards. And ELD, as you all know, I'm always thinking about English learners, so English language development. We exchanged information and ideas about works of art, and that fits an ELD standard. And then obviously the VAPA standards. Students are going to address the VAPA standards because they're going to be creating works of art and interpreting them. So think that's it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your contributions. Thank you for creating and writing about works of art with me. I really appreciate it. And I'll turn it back to Tony.
Thank you so much, Veronica, and everyone. What a fascinating discussion. And I really appreciate, Veronica, the strategies that you've given us as starting points for building historical empathy. I mean, you have given us so many different ways to connect with these historical figures. And as many of you know, with the Artifact project, students are meant to choose an unsung hero from history as a role model. So Veronica, you've really helped us tap into how to start identifying those heroic traits and actions in the historical context, because it can be very daunting for students to just see a list of individuals and they're going to go to like a discipline, like a domain. But you really are, with these strategies, helping us connect with the individual. And it has to be at that meaningful level that students can begin creating exceptional works of art. So thank you so much, Veronica, and for everyone. We only have a few more minutes, so I don't know if anyone has questions. Please type them in the chat. And as you're posing any questions, I want to take us quickly through our wrap up. So just to remind everyone that we have student competition that is ongoing. I know many of you know about the competition. If you're new, we run a student art competition that is open through April 27th, where students in grade 6 through 12 can choose a work of art. Choose an unsung hero and create a work of art in 2D or 3D medium, accompanied by an impact statement, really highlighting that role model. And we've had exceptional works of art, so I invite you to explore the award-winning works of art. Many of our ambassadors here have participated in the competition and have success in the competition, so I'm going to shout out our ambassadors, and you can see digital poster, a download for your classroom. So that's ongoing. And then I also wanted to let you know that our next online sessions are coming up. And so I want to, here's the steps to, we can skip this. These are the steps to participate in the competition. And you can find that information through the link that Emmy is posting in the chat on how students can participate. And then coming up, we have the online professional development. So everyone is invited to come to the next sessions. I know Brad LeDuc is on the call, so I invite Brad to just quickly unmute. Brad, and say hello to the group. December 11th, storytelling through art.
Yeah, nice to meet everybody. Brad LeDuc. Looking forward to the session there next month, and hope everyone can make it. Look forward to talking to you about some different strategies in the classroom as far as things we can do as teachers and educators to work with students on helping them prepare to tell stories. So look forward to meeting with you.
Very excited about your session, Brad. And Brad has also prepared an exceptional lesson plan with looking at the elements of a visual narrative, character plot, setting, heroic actions. And so you can register for that. And I think that is actually my wrap up. Veronica has graciously shared her email, and then you can always write to us if you have any questions. So it's 5:15. If there's nothing pressing in the chat, I know that for some of you on the East Coast, it's quite late, so I want to be mindful of time. So if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to artifact@lowmilken.org and we will respond to you. We'll be sending a copy of this recording and the lesson plan to everyone that is registered, and we look forward to seeing you on December 11th. So thank you again to everyone, to Veronica, Dr. Veronica Alvarez, to all of our ambassadors, our newcomers, for joining. I want to thank my staff, for my team here, for all the back production that makes this all possible with Emmy and Connor, and also our founder, Mr. Lowmilken, for bringing this program to us. So I'm going to invite everyone to unmute. We can say collective goodbye, and we could also applaud for that awesome I Am poem that we collaboratively created.
Good night.
Thank you,
Good night.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.